Hi, I'm John Ferry, Head of Careers in the London Professional Sport Unit. I've got a great pleasure today to speak with my colleague, Dr. John Brecknell, around stepping into the consultant role. John is or has been head of school for surgery in London. He's also been a director of medical education as well, and he is a consultant neurosurgeon. So, welcome, John. Nice to see you this afternoon. Thank you for giving up your time. So, see, today we're really talking about stepping into consultant role in your experience of the consultant role. So, the first question I'd like to ask really is, what do you know now that you wish you had known starting out as a new consultant?
There's a lot in that, isn't there? I'm just 18 years after appointment now, and that's quite a long time. Um, I think the most important thing that I learned around the time of appointment, and certainly very shortly afterwards, was how important support was from colleagues. So the business of having someone to be able to discuss cases with, having someone who would pop into an operating theatre to see how things were going, particularly if you were in any sort of trouble. Um, and a sort of camaraderie, a professional camaraderie within a group of consultants, within which you weren't necessarily a lesser and very junior partner. Um, I'd gone out of my way to find that, I think, and had come to realize how important it might be whilst being an overseas fellow before becoming a consultant. Um, but that was really important, and I recommend seeking out that sort of department to anyone who's uh, coming to the end of their time in training and looking for a consultant job. I think the thing that I didn't know um, from that point forward was just how much a consultant job keeps changing, and how I kind of thought that I'd get a consultant job, I'd be um, the principal clinician for a bunch of cases in the clinical areas in which I was working, and that's what I do for the rest of my life, and that things wouldn't change very much. But in actual fact, that wasn't the case at all. Um, and I increasingly got drawn into medical education and educational leadership. So much so that a few years ago, in fact, I stopped operating as a
Okay.
neurosurgeon because of the amount of time I was spending elsewhere. Um, and I think if you told me that I was going to be doing that, I'd have been very surprised. So perhaps that's the biggest thing I didn't know before being appointed.
Right, that's really, really useful. I guess that there's something there obviously about support and how the actual role changes. I just wanted to sort of pick up a bit on that in terms of as a new consultant, um, is there an expectation to sort of take on everything, or is there the option to sort of focus more towards your particular interests and actually say no to things but try and find that balance for yourself?
I think that's something that depends as much on the individual consultant as it does the department in which they've found themselves um, to be. There is not infinite freedom in a consultant job, just like any other.
Mm,
You get employed to do a job,
sure.
um, and that job might be very clear that you're going to be a general practitioner in your area of specialty, or it may be clear that you're being appointed specifically for a particular role.
Mm.
Um, and you may find that there's not as much flexibility with what's on the tin as you'd like there to be. So I think it's important to look at that. Um, the, the business of taking on things and saying no. Um, some departments are really collaborative, so much so that everything's done as a team. And others have a very individualistic approach. And if you find yourself in a department like that, you might well feel obliged to take everything on that comes to you and look after it yourself. And that's a very difficult thing to do right at the beginning of a job. And regarding saying no, every time someone asks you to do something, they're opening a door for new
Mm.
experience for you. And saying no closes that door without giving you any opportunity to explore what's inside it. On the other hand, if you say no to say yes to everything, you can find yourself overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And striking a balance between those two things is worth giving some thought to.
Yeah. Really important, really important. Another point I just wanted to pick up on was relationship building. Obviously, as a senior trainee, you're moving into or potentially moving into a new role, and it's obviously important to sort of build relationships within areas you might, be sort of, you have experience in, but obviously there's new roles in terms of being a consultant, and I just would be interested from your experience to hear what networks or relationships did you find useful to build in the early years of you being a new consultant?
So getting to know colleagues, getting to know the other consultants in the department was definitely worth investing in. That was very easy for me. I remember the first day I was there, we went out for a senior colleague's 50th birthday, I think, at the time. Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And they invited me along, and that was an easy way in. And there were 6 of us at that time, and I felt very soon able to speak to all of them with um, with a degree of mutual respect, I suppose. So that's quite nice. Um, there are all the other doctors in the team to get to know, particularly those that are assigned to work in your bit.
Mm.
Um, I think I invested in a couple of sort of fried breakfasts after ward rounds sort of things. And then the administrative team, secretaries, as they were called then, medical secretaries, um, every smile to them was worth a thousandfold back again. And if you upset a secretary, you really had to make good on it
Mm.
afterwards. Otherwise, you found your life quite tricky. The managers, and then the teams in the wards, in theatres, in any other clinical areas you're working. Um, all of these people are just colleagues, who, if you have a pleasant working relationship with, make your life at work much more pleasant, and therefore make your clinical output better, probably. This is kind of getting on with everybody,
Mm.
and just not um, just not giving anyone the opportunity to be upset with you. I think straight away relationships outside the trust were less relevant. But over the years, building up a network of other educators, particularly in surgery
Mm.
region in the country, became a really important part uh, of of what I ended up doing. Um,
Yeah, no, really, really valuable. I guess I was just thinking as well around, sort of core areas like service development or budget management. Were there sort of relationships that found actually useful in developing, perhaps outside the clinical sphere, in terms of other managers that oversaw those areas, those relationships that you found useful?
I wasn't called upon to do very much of that stuff at the beginning,
Okay.
and I think that's quite usual. Um, there's some very old wisdom about not taking on management role as a clinician until you've got your feet under the desk.
Sure.
There's something about making sure that you're completely comfortable with the basic clinical role before trying to become a leader of other
Mm.
clinicians. Although I have seen a number of people step into leadership roles within a year or two of appointment with very varying degrees of success. Some, rapidly progressing through the ranks to become medical
Mm.
directors, getting into all sorts of bother. Um, the principal contact for me was the clinical lead in the department, um, who was a lovely chap called Seb. He was one of the six of us,
Mm.
was the clinical lead, and he'd been appointed to do that job. And he didn't lord it over everyone, but he knew about things, and he knew about how to make things work, and he knew about the right way to do stuff.
Sure.
And he was a very valuable contact.
Great, great. Thank you. And I think just one final question. You sort of alluded a little bit to this already, in terms of support and building relationships with fellow consultants, but really just interested from the perspective of what you did before you actually became a consultant. So kind of thinking back to when you're a senior reg. And the question is this, from your own experience, in what ways can trainees prepare themselves for those extra leadership roles that are part of being a consultant, before they actually get the role? And I guess there's something there around actually what you found worked for you, but maybe in hindsight, reflecting back, what you maybe wish you had done, which may have, made the transition a little bit easier for you.
Yeah, I think that the transition looks absolutely terrifying from the point of view of being a trainee. Am I ready to be a consultant? As though it's something completely other. And of course, it really isn't. It's still about managing patients in exactly the same way as one did when one was a trainee. And the difference, of course, is that there's no consultant who's responsible for what you're doing. But of course, there are other people who are responsible for what consultants do. So it doesn't feel all that different. And the step is perhaps less looking back at it than it is looking forwards towards it. I made a conscious effort to do an out of program period overseas at the end of my training program.
Okay.
Um, and I did that because the program director was absolutely insistent that we all did. So he said, we can train you to do everything you need to do to be a consultant, but you want to take something extra to your job. You want to take some experience from another healthcare system. That was his line.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we all ran around like nutters trying to find places to go. And I went to Australia for 15 months, the last 15 months of my training. And that turned out to be a really valuable thing to do. The senior registrar system disappeared in 1993, which predates me in the UK, but they
Mm.
still had it in Australia. And so me and one other chap were effectively running the service, although we had several consultants who were in charge. They just weren't there very
Mm.
much. Um, so that gave one the opportunity to, with a degree of supervision, go about the business of making decisions and deciding what to
Yeah.
do and do it. And that was very useful. I think in the surgical specialties, it's still very common for people to do a fellowship um, with that sort of experience in mind. Um, and most senior trainees, ST 6, 7s, and 8s, will, particularly if they're getting on okay with their curricular development, be put in a place where the supervision that they have, although always there, is no longer on their shoulder and
Mm.
becomes increasingly remote, so that they get that sense of being able to make decisions, decide what happens, do it, but with someone there to make sure
Mm.
everything's okay and to be asked if there's a problem.
And I guess just picking up the other side, obviously you talked about the fellowship that you undertook, but I guess just thinking back, was there anything you think, I wish I'd done that, or others that have spoken to me or around their experience of moving into consultancy found that really valuable? Was there anything you thought, actually that course could have been really useful, or that experience could have been really useful transitioning in?
I don't think so very much.
Okay.
But the thing I'm glad I didn't do, which I know others did, was to wait for the job. So folk decided I'm going to work in that place. And it might have been the place they had trained, or it might have been a place that they wanted to be geographically near.
Mm.
Um, and I had several colleagues who were passed over year after year after year, and never got that job, and became less and less attractive to other centres as the years went by. Um, so I made a decision quite other to that to apply for the first job that came up, and that's what I did. Um, in terms of courses, I guess you're thinking perhaps, or you're referring maybe to the business of management.
Mm.
And I think there was a standard course at the King's Fund for registrars, which was a week long, um, that I didn't do actually. Um, but before I was given any sort of significant management responsibility of any sort, I had had a course put on for new consultants by my trust. Um, and I think those extended induction programs for newly appointed consultants are quite standard now, um, and probably better placed than the old senior registrar management courses, maybe.
Thank you. And I guess just one final one, if I may, is just really about your view as a consultant of a number of years in terms of the perception that actually, it's a job for life, in terms of you have to be sure about the first consultant job you get, because that's where you'll be staying. And as I say, it's building those relationships. Or actually, is that still the case? Can you still move around to sort of build your career?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think that if we look back 20 years, it was really unusual to move about. You were appointed uh, in a way that was intended to be for the rest of your working life. There were occasional people who moved, usually for personal reasons, but that really isn't the case anymore, I think. Certainly for the last 8 years, maybe, it's been quite common to see people move. And although towards the beginning of that time, there might have been a bit of a stigma, oh, why have they left that place? What is it that's made
Mm,
them? I wonder what's going on there. But that's kind of gone now because it's
mm,
just common. Um, there are various strategies you see people employ. Folk might get a job at a trust that's not a very popular place to work as a stepping stone into the job they really want. You might find that people um, move to develop a particular aspect of their career. That's quite common these days in medical leadership. So people going to be a divisional or group director in one organization and then leaving to be a medical director somewhere else in various staged ways. And I know a couple of people that have moved to allow them to develop careers in research and academia. Um, and I don't think people think twice about it anymore. I think it's just okay.
right. Thank you. John, that's all for today. And really, again, thank you for your time. It's been really, really valuable. And I'm sure the consultants that will see this video either within our workshops or within our web pages will find it really valuable. So again, thanks for your time.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.